happening in that moment when we feel that feeling? What's going on? Well, this is what happened to me in Mount Shasta. That's happened to me every once in a while in my life. This has happened to me very few times. And the lights came on. I looked across the room. There were two women there. One of them, I looked at her in the eyes, and I had that feeling. That magical thing happened. And everyone said their goodnights and went to bed. And she and I were talking, and I said, would you like to go for a walk outside? And she said, sure. I don't know if you've ever been to the town of McLeod or not. A walk around McLeod takes about a minute and a half, maybe. And we did. We did the circuit down past, there's an old lumber mill, and there's a museum, and a post office, and an ice cream shop, and then we were back. And I said, I enjoyed that. And she said, I did too. And I said, would you like to do it again? And she said, sure. So we did this several more times that evening. And it got late, and eventually we said goodnight. I never got her name. We said goodnight, and that was that, I believed. Well, it was on this same journey that a very powerful friend came into my life. I'll begin this story now, and it will have its completion before we have completed our science of compassion. It was underneath the front steps of the Stony Brook Inn that a mama kitty had given birth to a litter. She'd never done this before. She apparently didn't know or wasn't capable of nursing, and all the litter died. They believed. And it was while we were there at this workshop, the mama came out carrying this little bag of fur and bones, and he was still alive somehow, and he hadn't eaten since he'd been born. And they said, well, this is magic, that this animal has such a will to live, we'll name him Merlin. And they did, and Mr. Merlin was a beautiful, all-black little male kitty. It was supposed to be an outside cat. There were no animals allowed inside the Stony Brook Inn. Well, the night that I got there, he found my room. Somehow he got in, found my room. He meowed. I opened the door and let him in. He never left. And he was with me the entire week that I was there. And he was being nursed back to health. We slept together. We dined in my room together. He'd stand on the edge of the sink while I shaved and watch me. He'd stand on the edge of the tub while I was showering, and he'd catch little water drops in his whiskers that were bouncing off my body. And we became very good friends in that short week. As my workshop was coming to a completion, it was time for me to come back to New Mexico. And they said, we have our quota of animals. Would you like to take Merlin with you? And I did. I said, sure. Well, that morning I was leaving, and I had to go into Mount Shasta to get the things that you need to take an animal with you when you travel cross country. I got a leash. He was a leash-trained kitty, and little kitty water bowls and litter boxes and all the things that you need. Well, I was driving down the street, and I stopped at a light, and I looked up, and there on the corner was the woman that I'd seen the night before. See, the story is going somewhere, and it does tie together. It works out really well. And she was there, and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and she came over the window, and I said, hi, how are you doing? She said, fine. And the light turned green, and people were honking their horns. And I said, have you eaten yet? And she said, no. And I said, would you like to? She said, yes. She got in. We shopped for Merlin's things, and we went to a wonderful little cafe at the south end of town, and we sat and talked and talked and talked. And we were there for the rest of the morning, and the breakfast people left, and it got really quiet. And then the lunch people came in, and it got very busy, and then they left, and it got really quiet. And she was driving back to the East Coast, and I was driving back to New Mexico. And finally we said, well, if we're going to leave today, we probably should leave. And she walked me in my car, and I gave her a kiss on the cheek goodbye. I still, to this day, I don't know what her name is. And as I watched her walk away, this thing happened. And I found this tremendous sadness in my body. I actually began to miss her, and I watched her get in the car, and her taillights disappeared over the road to the highway. 10 years ago, if that had happened, I would have said that I was in love. And I would have done something really romantic, like jumped in my car and flagged her down on the freeway and said something to her. I don't know what it would have been. And I knew that something else was happening. I knew that's not what it was. And I sat in my car, and all of a sudden, huge tears began coming down my cheeks. And I said, wow, this must be a really powerful lesson that's happening here. First, there was the familiarity. And there was the sense, as she was leaving, there was a sense of sadness. And I simply closed my eyes and asked a question, as I often do. And I said, Father, I ask for the wisdom to understand what is it that I feel in my body. When you ask a question like that, whoever you believe you're asking that question to, you're expecting an answer. And rather than an answer, I got a question back. So they were making me work. And the question simply said, what is it about this woman that you miss? And I hadn't really thought about what it was. I just knew that I missed her. And I began thinking about all of the things that we had shared and all the conversation that we'd had the night before and all at the cafe, all through the lunch hour. And of the many things that had happened, what I knew was that I really missed her innocence. There was an innocence about her, a sense of awe and wonder. And this was big for me at this time in my life because I had gone through the academic world, the sacred journey of academia. I'd spent quite a bit of time in the corporate world, and there's a trade-off, and I know that you know this, that as we remember and as we develop the knowledge in our lives, we lose that innocence. And I'd become aware of that. As an example, I went to school not far from here, up in Fort Collins, Colorado, just north of here. And if you've ever driven west on Interstate 70 out of Denver, you've seen one of the most awesome spectacles that nature has to offer in the form of a road cut. And there's a road cut there where I-70 goes right through the side of a mountain, and all of the layers were tilted by geologic forces about this angle, and they are the most magnificent colors you've ever seen. It goes from the deepest black to a gray and an olive, and then a violet and a pink, and then an orange and a white, and then the whole thing starts all over again. Before I was a geologist, I used to look at that and I'd say, look at those colors. How beautiful. And after I was a geologist, what I said was, look at those magnificent dip angles and the overthrust faults. Because I'd lost a degree of innocence in that respect. And what I knew in that moment, as I recognized what it was that I was missing about this woman, I knew that I was not in love with her, that she had very, very powerfully, in a brief period of time, in just a matter of hours, had held a mirror to me of a huge portion of myself that I had lost in exchange to attain that which I chose to attain in my life. And I believe that we've all done this to some degree. I believe that we have all either given away consciously, lost without even knowing it, or had taken away by those who have power over us at some point in our lives, huge portions of ourselves to survive life. And perhaps more than ever before, at this time in human and geologic history, we're asking ourselves to bring those pieces back once again, so that in our wholeness we may know ourselves and have the experiences that we're choosing to have in this lifetime. It was an amazing experience for me to have that, and I knew that she had just shown to me the third Essene mirror of relationship, that which you have lost, given away, or had taken away. And the truth is, the reality of this experience is, I believe that if we are honest with one another, truly honest with one another, in almost every eye of every individual that you'll ever look into, if you look long enough, you'll see and you'll feel that sense of a portion of yourself. You'll feel that recognition. You'll sense that familiarity. I'll invite you to do this. Do this in a public place. When this happens to you, if it is in a bus or a train station or airport or a mall or grocery stores, because people in grocery stores are usually not expecting these kinds of experiences. When someone comes into your awareness and you feel that feeling, initiate a conversation about anything. Maybe it's in the produce department. That happens there frequently. Talk about produce. Nice melons, nice grapes, nice bananas, whatever it is. Anything to initiate conversation. And while they're speaking, ask yourself, in your mind, ask yourself this question. What is it that I see in this person that I lost, that I've given away, or that I had taken away within myself? And you'll be amazed at what comes back to you. You will be amazed. This little portion of the Essene mirrors, when we do these workshops, you never know who's going to show up and how it's going to work out. And typically we have people sign up and cancel and rearrange and postpone. Well, I did a workshop a few years ago. It was in the Southwest. And when all was said and done, it was a workshop of 40 males, all men. And some of them were cowboys. I mean, these guys didn't take off their hats or their boots for anything. They said, I'll hug a man in this room. I'll never hug a man outside that door. And this little piece of information was so powerful for them because they were all married, they all loved their wives, and they were all drawn to other women all the time through their jobs, their workplace, and they didn't know why. They didn't know why. This is a powerful mirror. This applies in the corporate world, and I use this as a manager in the telecommunications industry. I managed 2 separate and related departments. We had employees in those departments who believed they were in love with one another, which is fine. And it led to a lot of lost time. Long lunches, they had more flat tires, more sick kids, and more dead grandparents than I had ever seen. And I suspected this is what was happening. And I invited them. This is the value. This is why this is relative, because we can implement these principles in our lives. I invited them into a conference room. Each of them were married. They were both married, too, and they had their respective families, and they loved them very much. I invited them into a conference room with the 3 of us, and I invited them to sit and to look at one another across the table and to share with one another what it was that they were attracted to. Why were they drawn to one another? And there was almost an audible sigh of relief as they realized that they really weren't in love, that they didn't have to risk losing the families that they held dear, that they were witnessing in one another huge portions of themselves that they had lost within themselves. What a powerful mirror. 1988. I was working on the Star Wars defense program in Waterton Canyon, south of Denver. And we had some high-ranking Pentagon officials that came to review our program, and each department had one invitation of an individual that would get to go, and to this day I don't know how it landed on my desk, and it did. And I went to this review, and afterwards I had the opportunity to spend time with some of these officials. And there was a conversation that was happening it was a dinner, just before a dinner that evening. And one of the people in the group looked at this one particular gentleman. He had risen through the ranks of corporate America and was now seated on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And they said to him, how did you do this with your life? What is it that had to happen in your life to allow you a position of this magnitude of power and control? And he was very conscious when he said this. He looked at everyone in the circle as we were there. And he said, to get where I am today, each time I climbed a rung on the corporate ladder, I gave a piece of myself away. And then I'd climb another rung, and I'd give another piece away. And he said, pretty soon I'd given away everything that I've ever held dear to me, everything I've ever loved. I've given away my friends. He said, I essentially have no friends. I've given away my family. My wife and I are divorced. My children and I don't even speak any longer. And he said it was worth it to me because in my life, my goal was to have this power and this control. It was worth it. So he was conscious of it, and I was amazed that he was that candid, that he shared that. And I know that we do this, that we compromise pieces of ourselves to survive whatever it is that life offers to us. So when you find yourself powerfully, magnetically drawn to another person, maybe it doesn't make sense why that would be. Maybe it's a person of the same sex, and you try to put a label on that. And I've worked with a lot of clients in the last few years who have had those experiences. Or maybe you say, I'm a woman, and I just like to be around men. What does that mean? Or I'm a man, I just like to be around women. Think about this experience. Think how odd this experience is that we're having right now. We are essentially genderless souls. We're not male or female until we come into bodies. And then we come to this world of polarity, and we must choose one or the other. And when you choose one or the other, you compromise that which you did not choose. So as a male,